This podcast is powered by the pros at Paschal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPaschal.com.
Bio wondering, is he going to leave? What do you know of what's going on with Muss right now?
You know, all I know is what I think I've talked about it before. This is almost over a month ago. I had someone who's not a typical source for me, but is in a position to know, approach me and said that he had some pretty good information that Musselman had been holding off on signing a contract extension, and there were rumors he was looking at Louisville. I haven't heard anything else along those lines, and none of my other sources that I use think that he's gone, but some people I work with think there's at least a kind of a 60-40 chance that he is, and I guess we'll find out who's right and who's wrong. I mean, all I know is right now he's still the coach, and he's apparently looking at portal guys, so we'll see how it goes.
Hey, did you watch any of these conference championship games? Did you have a problem with any of these number 4 seeds? How do you feel about this tournament? Will you fill out a bracket?
No, I don't ever do that. I mean, I just, I think you got to get lucky to win one of these bracket things, because there are usually so many upsets. I don't have any real problems. I think a lot of people get bent out of shape when when some of these conference champions in the smaller conferences lose, and therefore they don't get in, so somebody else gets in, or maybe 2 teams get in, and you only thought one was going to get in, so it knocks out some of these last 4 ins. But I'm not, if it was up to me, and people hate this idea, but I'd do away with conference tournaments and use this past week every year to just double the size of the tournament. 128 teams, eliminate that play-in stuff, and let the first week be seeded teams. Whoever's the highest seeded team gets to play at home. That would generate a lot of revenue. Let the conferences keep their own money. Don't give it to the NCAA. They don't need any more money. And then if you can go to somebody else's place and knock them off, big deal. That's great. But it would eliminate all the complaining and gnashing of teeth, and it would, I think then the committee, really what they would end up doing is mostly just seeding teams. They wouldn't have to, sit around and worry about who gets in and who doesn't. There'd still be some that wouldn't, but that's what I would favor, but nobody asked me.
Well, I mean, so there's so much focus on, who was left out and who's seeded here and there and everything. All I know is that when I look at the SEC tournament, maybe A&M played their way in, which surprises me because I've always kind of felt like you don't make your resume based upon winning a couple of games in the conference tournament. It might depend on who it is you beat, but Tennessee played their way off the number 1 line. And if I'm a Tennessee fan, I got to be really nervous right now that you go into the big tournament with back-to-back losses.
Well, the whole SEC's got something to prove because the last few years the league hasn't done very well. Arkansas has done well, but they're not in it now. So some of these other people are saying, Kentucky has the best path to the Final Four. Well, we'll see. But Calipari does not have a good record over the last 7, 8, 9 years in the NCAA tournament. So we'll see if this year can be different. But I'm going to remain skeptical. The league, it looks balanced, and I guess it is, but it just the history of the last few years is when these SEC teams get in the NCAA tournament, they don't do well. And Tennessee is one of those teams.
That could be an interesting matchup, I believe, in that side of the bracket. I think the committee does that stuff on purpose a little bit, but Texas-Tennessee matchup could be all right. So give me one team, Mike, out of the SEC you think could win it if you're saying the SEC needs to prove itself. Auburn's talented. They play as a team. They kind of walk through all their games in the SEC tournament. Do you think they could do something big and win the Natty this year?
I see them going farther than anybody else. Do I think they'll win it all? Bruce Pearl said they were going to win 9 starting last week. I don't see that, but they might make the Final Four. And Kentucky, it could happen for them. Those are the 2 teams I would look at.
They're athletic, yeah. Both those teams. I mean, Kentucky. The thing that worries me is they can't get stops. You know, that's the one thing that Coach Cal, you could always rely on when they had their good teams, is they could buckle down and get stops. And hey, they got the best athletes, so maybe they buy in, and at the right moment they could turn it on.
Sure, and you know, who knows? I mean, you know what happens when you run a lot? You expend a lot of energy, so you play 2 games in 4 days or whatever it is. Sometimes you can run out of juice. We really saw that, I thought, in the conference tournament. I thought Arkansas played well. I thought they played well up until halftime, you know, the South Carolina game. But you could just look at the minutes played against Vandy, and then you watch it drop the next time out because those guys were gassed. And so that's always something to look at the NCAA tournament, too. You know, how do you play? What's your style? And do you have the bench? And can you run? If you like to run, can you run and win 2 games in a weekend like that? There's always a number of factors.
As far as it's concerned for Arkansas, we know Manifield, Harris, and Pinion have gone into the portal, just assuming there will be more that are on the way. You know, it reminds me of the end of football season, where we're just sort of like, all right, it's announcement season too, announcing them going into the portal or announcing them staying. And, you know, I just expect this will be a pretty busy week as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, just looking early on at some of these guys in the portal, I was scanning over looking for bigs, and man, there's some big guys that average 2 points a game. I don't think you want to go after one of those guys. So it's not enough just that you've got a lot of people in there. You got to find somebody that you think can come in and help. And then I think the lesson learned this year with Muss is, I've talked about this before, he's a old school guy, very intense. And when you bring a guy in that's never been coached that way, and especially if he's all over you and then you don't exactly do what he wants in practice, so he has a habit of you're not playing until you show me you can do this. So you go back and forth with him on that, and then if you don't end up playing much, you're mad. And then that becomes a disruptive influence on the team. So I think you've got to be very careful this time around to make sure that whoever he brings in here understands this is how I coach, and maybe try to find somebody that's been coached that way before.
Yeah, there's a big from Oklahoma State who started a lot of games. It's Garrison. He's a 6'11" center, 7.5 points per game. He might be.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Do you think then, is there going to be an announcement with Coach Muss, like as far as, hey, he's coming back, or are we going to know? Do we know anything in the next 48 hours or so?
Boy, it would be good. I mean, you would hope that something, but the point is you see all these coaches whose names were out there, and then they've come up and said, no, I'm back. He hasn't, as far as I know, signed a contract extension, and I think that's what the announcement has to be. I've signed an extension, and we don't have that yet. So till you have it, I think there are people, I don't know, Razorback fans have been, I see some worried a little bit, but a lot of people, fans kind of deal with this year to year, and right now they're kind of bummed out. So it's like, oh, well, if he leaves, they'll find somebody else, you know. And sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. I mean, Arkansas went a long time without winning the way Muss has won. I don't think anybody wants to go back, down that road again.
The whole idea here, too, is so there will be a coach for the men's basketball team. It's just you have to have a coach, but players want to know who it is they're going to be playing for. So you got to have you got to have the extension announcement first before you're even worried about who's out there in the portal and who fits the team next year, because they want to know who they're playing. They're not going to come to Arkansas if they don't think Muss is going to be the coach now.
That's true. That's the biggest issue. You're not bringing in 4 or 5 guys when there's no word on what you're doing. So again, you would think fairly quickly this has to get resolved. I've asked myself, if he did leave, what Yurachek would do. And I think you may be looking at a younger up-and-coming coach, you know, somebody that you can pay less money to. But I want to see if he ends up doing what he claimed he was going to do when he was hired, which is offer performance incentive contracts. In other words, I'll pay you a little more money than I normally would, and I'll have a bunch of incentives in here But I'm not paying you $12 million or $15 or $20 million to lose when we have to fire you. We're not getting into that situation again. So, sooner or later, he's got to deal with that issue, because that's the biggest thing that I think is going on in athletics right now. There's not many schools like A&M that can just pull back and get $80 million to get rid of a coach.
Baseball was fun to watch this last weekend, Mike. I think the nation's focus is on basketball, but it feels like Arkansas focus a little more on baseball now with the number one team, and you can't do much better than outscoring an SEC team 23-1. I don't know how good Mizzou is. In fact, I think they're going to have trouble winning any series in the SEC. But the Hogs did with them, I think, what they probably should have done with them.
Yeah, what do you face? 27 batters and they score 1 run? Talk about dropping your staff ERA. They're now number 1 in the country and number 1 in strikeouts. Had one of these Ask Mike questions where the guy was happy, but he said, "Man, I'm scared, because every time something looks good for me as a Razorback fan, there's always the boogeyman waiting around the corner." And I said, "Well, look, here's the best thing I can tell you. In baseball,
BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.